Hey there, record heads. Make sure to check out bagsunlimited.com for your vinyl record supplies. Bagsunlimited.com supplies record stores and collectors around the world with protective sleeves, archival storage supplies, record storage boxes, protective vinyl shipping mailers, and tons of other durable solutions that'll keep your records safe for years. Just go to bagsunlimited.com and check out their audio and record supplies. That's bagsunlimited.com.
And now, on with the show. Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Oh, hello everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 471 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record nerds and music collectors, and I think I screwed up that intro, but anyway, you know who you are. I'm not here to tell you that, but what I am here to do today is to share a new interview. We had a wonderful opportunity to speak with Mac McCaughan of Superchunk, and of course, he's the co-founder of Merge Records as well. Today, Mac's going to share insights about the band, starting the label, being a record collector, the evolution of independent labels, and the challenges of running an artist-driven record label like Merge Records. We also deep dive into his record collecting journeys, the significance of limited vinyl releases, the status of the vinyl pressing industry as observed through an independent label like Merge Records, the success of merge bands like Neutral Milk Hotel, and more. Plus, we talk about Superchunk's upcoming tour of Australia, and we cover a lot of ground today. So, Australia, get your tickets now. Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Sydney, Melbourne. TroubadourPresents.com. Superchunk always puts on a great show. There's going to be vinyl on the merch table, so don't miss them this December. And hey, if you enjoy records, music, etc., hit that follow button in your podcast app and check out all the other episodes of The Vinyl Guide. There's over 450 other episodes featuring artist interviews. We talk record and music stories with folks such as Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains, episode 467, Justin Trosper of Unwound. We spoke to him, episode 468. Of course, David Yao of Jesus Lizard. He talks to me and my cat about vinyl records and more. That's episode 460. Eddie Kramer, super producer and engineer, discusses recording with Jimi Hendrix, episode 466. And don't forget, Stephen and Jeff McDonald of Red Cross drop by, episode 454. And we got hundreds more. It's all free if you don't mind hearing a few ads from our sponsors, or if you want your podcast pure, commercial-free, and even extended and high resolution, you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/vinylguide. There you get to enjoy pure, uncut Australian flake podcast music nerdery. That's patreon.com/vinylguide. All right, and without further delay, let's talk to Mac McCaughan of Superchunk and Merge Records. Ladies and gentlemen, this week on The Vinyl Guide, we've got Mac from Superchunk, Merge Records, Portastatic, and a whole slew of other projects. Mac, understand Superchunk's coming down to Australia in December. Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Sydney, Melbourne. 30th anniversary of Foolish. Are you guys doing the whole album, Foolish album, beginning to end?
No, we will be, because we've been doing a few shows already. We did a tour of Spain and Portugal. We have some U.S. dates coming up before we get to Australia. And last year was the anniversary for On the Mouth. So what we were doing on those shows was like a set that was like heavily songs from that record, you know, like 7 or 8 songs from that record, and then a bunch of other stuff. Though we did do one show where we just started at the beginning and played the whole album, and then did an extra long encore with like a bunch of other songs. So like we may play it start to finish at some point, but it's more just like leaning heavily on it. And then you know, like we've never really played 2 sets the same in a row, so it seems weird to start now. The only time we ever did that was when we did a tour, an acoustic Foolish tour. We recorded that album 5 years ago. We did an acoustic version of the whole record. And then we toured for that, and we were doing it start to finish. But in general, we like to mix it up and just play songs from all our records, you know.
Good. Oh, we're looking forward to having you down here. Now, this being the Vinyl Guide podcast, I got to ask, and there's no wrong answer here, but do you collect records? Would you consider yourself a bit of a record nerd?
Yes, I would say that. Okay. I have a lot of records.
Describe your ailment.
Well, my ailment, for some reason, does not get better over time. It only gets worse in the sense that I just will discover, there's so much music out there to learn about. And then once you start learning about it, you're like, well, I got to find that record, And the most recent symptom of my ailment is that, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I started listening to and learning about Japanese jazz and a lot of artists that I'd never heard of before, though I have a lot of jazz records and I love the music and grew up like my dad listening to jazz and playing in jazz band and all this stuff. But it was just a whole world that, because of where we live, wasn't really available, and I think because of streaming and reissues and stuff, it became something that was easier to find out about. And so the last, like I said, 10 years or so, I've just been trying to find as much of that stuff as I could. And we did a tour of Japan earlier this year. And interestingly, a lot of record stores in Japan have lots of American jazz because that's what they wanted, Blue Note and things like that. And so it's not always easy to find the Japanese jazz records, but I found a couple pretty magical stores on this last tour, including a store. I shouldn't even say the name of the store because then it's going to get ruined for everyone, but a store in Sapporo that just had just incredible stuff. And this store in particular, and I will say most stores in Japan, they just take such good care of the records that they're stocking, as old as they may be. I'm never pulling them out saying oh, what condition is this in? Because they just all seem like they're in great shape,
I had a run through Japan a couple years ago, and I spent a lot of time in shops, and you probably had a similar experience. Record shopping there is not like in many of the Western countries. Quite often you sit down, you'll get a cup of tea, they'll put on record after record, and pretty soon you're introduced to all these artists, Tiramisu Hinu and some of the other.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, those are the sort of artists you discover, and you're just kind of in this relaxed state. You're listening, you're able to absorb. You're not just flipping through racks and kind of on your own. You get a bit of a Sherpa to take you through some of the stuff you may not know.
Yeah, that's great. It's pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm going to hit you up privately for that shop in Sapporo because.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you do a lot of record shopping while you're touring? Do you get much of a chance for that?
I try to. In some ways, it's just such a fallback thing to do when you have extra time on the road, because you're often in transit, so it's not like you're home and you can get something done, around the house or something. So. Yeah, we're looking for record stores, and even if we're not finding things, it's still fun to just see what's out there and talk to people. And you never know, you'll just last time we were in Portland, Maine, just walk down the block from the club, and there was this store that was half clothing, half records, but the used records they had were just these insane boxes of new wave 7 inches. From Boston and beyond. Boston's nearby, so clearly someone who grew up in that scene or whatever and collected all these records and was selling their singles. And so it's always interesting to find, to be looking through what was clearly someone's collection that's deep into a scene that you don't know about. And you're just man, I don't, I've heard of half of these bands, and the other half, they look really cool. You don't know what it's going to be like, but hey, why not risk $4 or whatever, Yeah. So that's kind of a fun thing that can happen anywhere, really,
Yeah. I always the neighborhoods that record stores are in are generally the neighborhoods where you get kind of the cool clothing shops. You can get a really good burrito and coffee, really quality cuisine or food is there. It generally, the shops around those neighborhoods are kind of where I want to hang out in any given city. So if you find the record store, you're probably in a pretty interesting part of town. Is there a label, with Merge Records, is there a label that you, especially in the beginning, took a kind of a page from their book, a label who inspired you as in the way that you ended up running Merge Records?
Yeah, I would say that there was a few labels that were very influential on us, and like we wanted to emulate, the things about bands and the things about records and record labels that got us excited as fans. Like we've always kind of run the label and the band as fans. And so I think that, the most obvious one is Dischord, which is in Washington, D.C., not far up the road, from us in North Carolina. And we were really into Minor Threat and then Rites of Spring and other bands on that label, The Faith, Beefeater, like so many good bands in the 80s that we were listening to, of course, and Fugazi eventually. But also just how they ran the label and how they sold the records. I mean, the packaging, of course, looked amazing, great photographs and great design. But the fact that they were selling it for like a price that was on the sleeve, pay no more than blah, blah, blah. Like that seemed really cool to us. So like Dischord was like a big influence. Another DC label that had amazing aesthetic was Teen Beat Records, and the band Unrest. It's a band that we ended up touring with a bunch later, but Teen Beat, and then the labels that Teen Beat was influenced by, such as like Factory and 4AD, these English labels that each had like a real like visual identity and like an aesthetic that you could look at a 4AD record and kind of identify it from a distance, and so I think that those labels, in addition to Sub Pop, Amphetamine Reptile, K Records, these are all labels that were really influential on us. And what we found when we started Merge in '89 was that most of these people, you could just call them up and say like, hey, like, where do you get your tapes duplicated? Where do you get your sleeves printed? Where do you get your records mastered? And like everyone was super helpful and interested in, fostering those kinds of communities in different towns.
Mm-hmm. Is there a bit of a guiding philosophy for Merge Records?
I think that, I don't know that we've ever really like codified it into a philosophy. I just think that, like I said, is that it's an artist run label. And so I think that we can see what the interests of the artists are and take those into account. We started the label and continue to run it as music fans. And so we can see that side of things, like what fans want from a record and from a label and from what they want from their artists. And so I think that those two angles, which is maybe different than what some record labels in the classic sense are really thinking about, would amount to our philosophy,
Because just watching, the arc of Merge Records, and it's probably unfair to even call it an arc because arcs have a line going downward. Merge just seems to be going from strength to strength, where you have a lot of labels like Dischord, still active, but they're doing a lot more legacy releases, not as much new product as they used to. Merge continues to go really, really strong, and I'm just curious to, when you sit back and think about it, what you give credit to for Merge prevailing over time, where many or most other similar labels struggled on the long term.
I think that, the labels that started before us, but around the same time that we really looked up to and see as our peers, Sub Pop and Matador, for instance, really are still going strong. And I think it's because that they've always kind of prioritized like the quality of the music that they're putting out. Not that every record will sell the same amount, but just that it all like has a certain standard of being creative and interesting and inspiring and someone's like unique artistic vision, you know. And I think that one reason that we still exist is because, I mean, we have great people that work at the label and that have worked at the label that have, again, the artist's interest in mind. And the fact that we never really tried to grow too fast. I mean, we definitely grew, and there were certain moments where a record would sell a lot more than anticipated maybe, and that would help us grow. But I think that when we started, we didn't start the label saying like, oh, well, we're starting a label and we're going to like sell this many records and have this kind of office and have this many employees, et cetera, et cetera. It's always just been more dictated by what's happening on the ground, you know what I mean? And so change has happened, whether it's growth or shrinking or whatever you would say, like organically over time, just trying to like, I mean, evolving certainly and having to adjust what you're doing based on how people are consuming music and that kind of thing, but always trying to be realistic about things and you know, not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So let's take an example of that 7-inch singles. Over the course of time, you know, the role of 7-inch records seems to have changed, seems to evolve. Can you talk to that evolution? Like, how is it different today than it was in the early 90s or before?
I mean, when we started, you know, in the 89, the first couple of releases we did were tapes, and then we started with 7 inches. And again, our inspiration was punk and post-punk and indie labels that were putting out just classic singles throughout the 70s and 80s, you know, whether it was by the Ruts or the Undertones or Stiff Little Fingers, you know, punky things like that, or, you know, Bauhaus, Susie and the Banshees, like classic records that we were always looking for when we were going record shopping, or Flying Nun, you know, singles by the Chills and the Bats and the Clean and bands like that. Like that was kind of our inspiration. And the 7-inch was like always like the kind of grail of that music, you know? And so I think that the difference between then and now, one difference is that when we started, you know, we put out 2 singles before we did our first big tour, and you could get enough attention around a single to get reviews, get record stores to carry it, get radio stations to play it, and then like book a tour. You know, not to thousands of people, but enough people to like do that. And now I think trying to get that kind of attention with the single is really hard because, first of all, more people just consume music from, you know, the internet or whatever. But also there's just, I mean, as of even like 20 years ago, there was just like so much more stuff coming out all the time that it was harder to kind of break through, you know, whereas when we started, you know, you go to a store like Pure Platters in Hoboken and you're looking through like the 7-inch bin and like finding like the new Melvin single or the new Mudhoney single or whatever. And like, that was like a marker unto itself, as opposed to like, oh, like now I feel like we still do 7 inches, and Superchunk in particular still releases singles because I still think that they're fun and cool thing, and I enjoy buying them and listening to them. I mean, they still kind of represent like an idea about how to present your songs, you know, but it's just not the same thing in terms of what they mean culturally, you know.
Yeah, the function of them originally sounds like it was to plant a bit of a flag or to get some attention. Yeah. Now it's, you know, it's for the super fans almost to have as part of their collection, kind of support the band.
But I think it's also still, from an artist standpoint, it's still an idea like here's our best new song. Here's a cool B-side that wouldn't fit on a record, so like you might not hear it otherwise. and here's some artwork that looks awesome in this format, you know? And so like, I still think that like that aspect from a musician standpoint, from an artist standpoint is valuable. And like you said, it appeals to a super fan, you know? But, you know, like we did a tour earlier this year with the band Fucked Up from Canada, and they're still putting out singles at like a rapid pace. It's amazing. Their merch table is crazy. It's like 27 inches, you know what I mean? And I really admire that like loyalty to the format, you know? Because it does allow you to, like I said, like kind of just do stuff that you wouldn't include on an album necessarily, because an album is like a whole different thing. And it's like, oh, like here's 2 or 3 weird songs that we wrote that you know, maybe we didn't want to take this idea out to a whole album, but it makes sense as an EP, you know? So I still admire that from an artistic standpoint, even if like economically it may not make sense anymore, you know?
Are you surprised at the popularity of vinyl in the last 10 years? Are you surprised that it's kind of come roaring back a bit?
I am kind of surprised, to be honest. I mean, I know why I love it, but like I'm surprised at the staying power. Now, the fact that it's gotten so expensive to make and therefore expensive to sell, I mean, expensive to buy, I don't know how that's going to fare. You know, like I wish that it was still more of a medium or more of a format that you could, the difference, I guess, between when it was the main format and now is that when it was the main format and it costs whatever it costs, like it was never like cheap, but like, let's say it cost $12.99 or something like that. You could check out an album by a band that you didn't necessarily like know if you were going to like love this record or not. But when a record costs like $30, you kind of got to know like, oh yeah, like I've already streamed this record, so I know that I like it. Now I'm going to go buy it, you know? So there is a way to vet it before you spend that much money, but I wish that it was less of a luxury item that it seems to be becoming, you know?
Are you seeing the volumes staying the same, growing, declining, just really over the last 12 months or so?
I would say staying the same or declining a little bit, maybe. But I think that there's always like readjustments that happen, and it really depends on the artist, obviously. But I mean, I think one conversation we have all the time is colored vinyl versus black vinyl, like special editions. Like there's, you know, I mean, Taylor Swift being the most extreme example, but like artists coming out with so many variants of one record that it's hard to keep track of. And does that really work? Is that helping anyone? Is that hurting retail? Like how, you know, what's the idea? Because I like colored vinyl. I think it looks cool, you know, especially if it's like not random, like we have 8 different colors, but like if it goes with the packaging and the design and like, you know, I think that's awesome, you know. But at the same time, if black vinyl is the cheapest and that's the way it's going to be most accessible to most people, like, is that the format that everyone should be moving to? I don't know, you know, that's a conversation that we have. And I think that like, so overall volume might be staying the same, but I think maybe some of these exclusive things are like not as strong as they were for a while there.
Right. I assume that has a lot to do with the economy too. There's a lot of people who just can't afford to buy 6 variants of the new OC's record. They have to satisfy themselves with 1 or 2.
Right. Yeah.
I noticed at Merge Records you have now peak vinyl. Can you share a bit about how that may differ from, I guess, a standard vinyl issue? Hey there, audiophiles. If you're seeking stylish furniture to showcase your stereo and record collection, well, look no further then SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop designs extraordinarily elegant record cabinets and consoles that add sophistication and panache to your music hobby. Handcrafted in the good old USA in the vinyl-loving city of Portland, Oregon, Sidetracked Workshop's designs are a music lover's dream. Made with real walnut veneered wood and brass accents, these gorgeous designs add class and taste to the record room and ship fully assembled and ready to enjoy. Just check out the designs for yourself at SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on records. Don't keep them in a crate, and don't risk your records on those feeble wooden pegs from IKEA. Your music deserves the dignity of Sidetracked Workshop. That's SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Elegant solutions for the vinyl lifestyle. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to GrooveWasher.com and use discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's GrooveWasher.com, discount code VINYLGUIDE10. I noticed at Merge Records you have now peak vinyl. Can you share a bit about how that may differ from, I guess, a standard vinyl issue?
So, well, peak vinyl was kind of our cheeky way of like referring to the limited color variant that we would do for each release. And peak vinyl referring to the fact that like at a certain point we'll reach peak vinyl where people like then kind of get tired of it and then just kind of fall back and go like, okay, like I just want a black vinyl LP. You know what I mean? So I don't think we've reached peak vinyl yet, you know? But that's kind of what the peak meant. But the peak vinyl version could be like a special color, or it could be that it comes with, like we've done versions of albums that came with a special print by the cover artist or whatever, you know, like that kind of thing could include a flexi disc. So it's more just like, again, for the super fan, like if you're just someone that's like, I just want to listen to the record, you get the regular black vinyl version. If you're like the world's biggest clientele fan, you get the color vinyl version with the special packaging or whatever, right. You know.
And are those limited in volume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the
It's usually ones? That the peak is limited, and then the black vinyl is the one that will remain in print forever, kind of idea.
Right. So, for example, Superchunk, Wild Loneliness. There's a green volcano version of the record. Looks very sweet. How many of those would be available?
Oh, I can't remember for Superchunk what we did. Like when I do remember that we did, like for instance, an even more limited version that was a North Carolina version, because obviously, like we're from North Carolina, and there's a lot of great record stores in North Carolina. So we're kind of trying to figure out a way to like honor them and give them something like special, you know, that other stores didn't have. And so that version was like pink and green vinyl and had a cool print by the artist Ron Liberty that like a print of like kudzu, which is, you know, like the native weed that they're gonna kind of grows over everything around here. And that, I think we made, you know, a few hundred, maybe like 400 copies of that version that was just for North Carolina.
Right.
So that kind of thing. And we'll bring those on tour or whatever, you know, so you can get them other places maybe. But the idea is
outside of North Carolina, you can get those outside of North Carolina. Okay.
And, you know, if we bring them with us, but I just mean like the initial idea was like, oh, if you're, you know, Lunchbox Records in Charlotte or Bull City Records in Durham, like you can get a thing that like no one else will.
Oh, okay. Where do you guys get your vinyl press? Is there one plant, or are there multiple plants?
Multiple plants. Of course, like got crazy during the pandemic, but like in general, just seeing who has the capacity to get it done when we need it done. I think certain plants offer more variants, or more options when it comes to color vinyl. If an artist is really wanting something really specific, you might have to go to one plant because this plant doesn't offer it over here. Some plants don't press 7 inches, others do. It's just kind of weighing it all out and trying to not have all your eggs in one basket. And in addition to that, so there's in the last 2 years we've started working with a plant here in North Carolina called Citizen Vinyl. Up in Asheville, actually, that just got really devastated by this hurricane. I think that Citizen is on high ground, so hopefully they're all right. But that town, in general, really got ravaged, and the smaller towns around it. And we actually had this conversation today, like, wow, like, are they going to have power? Like, what about the people that work there? Like, where do they live? Like, people are just like, it's a really crazy situation up there. So, yeah, thinking about the people in the mountains right now.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, hope they're safe. Hope all the gear is dry and they're back up to stamping them soon.
Yeah, sure. That's what they're hoping too.
You mentioned bringing records out on tour. I assume you're going to have vinyl at the merch table for the tour, including Australia?
Yes. Now, bringing vinyl to other countries is always tricky because it's heavy and takes up a lot of space in the suitcases. But we'll figure out a way to get vinyl down there, whether we're shipping it ahead of time or bringing it on the plane or what have you.
You said vinyl is starting to, I guess, stabilize, possibly decline a bit. Are you thinking we have?
And again, that's not really across the board. I don't think. Because there's always artists that are growing their profile, and but I just feel like in general, as it gets more expensive, it's available to fewer people because fewer people can afford it. You know what I mean? So, I think that there's fluctuations in the cost of making things, and so that could go back the other way. You know what I mean? But that's just a feeling that I've gotten over the last couple of years.
Okay. Your spidey senses are telling you that.
Well, there was also, it's also hard to sort out because during the pandemic, there was such a run on vinyl. People were sitting home with nothing to do, but they want to support their favorite bands and they want to buy some records, so demand went through the roof. And so this just could be, like I said, kind of a correction on that.
Right.
Kind of crazy run,
And as a result of that, we started seeing a lot of record pressing plant lead times go to 6, 9, even 12 months or more. Are you seeing that kind of come back down now?
Yeah, that is normalized a lot. And I think people are back to just kind of having capacity, getting back on normal schedules, that kind of thing.
Yeah. One of my concerns about that is, there was such a demand for vinyl that the plants may have potentially over-engineered. And now we may see kind of this capacity, extraneous capacity available, and unsure what they will do with that. Maybe we'll see influx of bootlegs or different things coming out as a result of, now we've got all these record pressing plants. They got to do something. What are they going to put out?
Maybe prices come down, and then it's more feasible for more people to buy records. If a lot of that depends on the actual price of the materials, but I think a lot of the inflation of that was some of those similar supply chain issues that made the lead times go up so much during the pandemic. So again, I think stuff is still like normalizing from that era.
So when you started your career, and I assume that your love of music is what drove you to the necessity of developing this Merge Records, this ability to kind of put your music out there. You didn't become a musician to start a record label. You started a record label just to aid your music. Now, transitioning and I know you haven't fully transitioned because obviously you have many musical projects, but to move into running a company like Merge, has that been difficult? What sort of skill sets did you have to develop that felt less comfortable for you to do that?
I mean, the least comfortable thing for myself, as well as my partner at the label, Laura Balance, who deals more with the business side of things, is always talking about money with bands. You know what I mean? Because it's way more fun to talk about making records and playing shows and writing songs and all that stuff. I think that the more uncomfortable conversations are always around money and contracts, and we didn't use contracts for the first 10 years that we were a label. It was just handshake deals, and then we started putting out records by bands that would leave after one record, and we'd invested money in this band, and then they would be doing well, so a bigger label would come along and steal them away, and we figured you know what, maybe we should start using contracts. So I think that the contractual business side of things is probably the least comfortable part of it.
With so many records on Merge, and we talk about the successes all day long, is there a record that you put out that broke your heart? A record that you thought you would really do well, or something you want everyone to hear that may not have achieved that original target?
Oh my God, there's so many. There's for everyone that everyone's heard of course there's probably 10 that you're just why don't people know about this? You know what I mean? Or why didn't people grasp the greatness of this? But I don't know, for instance, it's a new record, so we can't really say oh, no one's latched onto this record because it just came out. But the Jade Hairpins record that just came out, it's Mike and Jonah from Fucked Up writing these total pop songs in different styles. And, they play live shows, but they don't tour a bunch like Fucked Up does. And so it's one of those things of how do you get people in this day and age to listen to a record that is just full of amazing songs? And that's without a big tour behind it or a gimmick of some kind, And so those are often the records that you think I wish that more people would have just heard that record. But, there's still a chance for this band because this record just came out. It's called Get Me the Good Stuff. So that's a new one. Gosh, I don't know. I guess I would have to go back. For the most part, even the records that don't blow up, as they say, have a following, and so it's hard to say oh, this record, I think that definitely some records suffered because they came out at a time when the world was shutting down. Australian band Cable Ties, amazing band that we started working with, and their record came out right before lockdown. Their whole tour, everything was canceled, of course, and so I feel that's, there's nothing you can do about it, so you can't say you regret that, but it's just one of those things where you think wow, you feel bad for a band that really just had this terrible luck in the timing of something, the record still exists and it's still amazing. So they didn't take anything away from the world, but it's just that the band themselves, didn't get to come support that record when that came out. But, they've been here since then and played great shows and amazing bands. So, but there's some situations like that where you just think if only this thing hadn't happened, then, maybe people would have, more people would have heard about this record. And you do feel responsible as a label because that's kind of your job, is to make sure the most people possible hear a record. And we're always thinking about that and trying to figure out ways to get these records in front of as many people as possible.
When it comes to reviewing or listening to music to assess whether it's something that Merge wants to get involved in, is there a process you have? I assume that you've got a way that you prefer to listen to music. How do you get yourself in that mood to be able to intake a new artist and assess if that's someone that could fit on Merge?
I think that, obviously it's changed over the years. It used to be like demo tapes that people are like handing us on tour or sending in the mail, and then CDRs. And now it's usually just a link to something, SoundCloud or whatever. And, I think that I've adjusted to that. I used to hate listening to music on my computer because I do think that it just sounds kind of shitty, but used to it now. People often send, obviously, like, just like too much information, literature with like a demo or something. Like, it's good to know a little something, but sometimes when the story is really long, you just kind of go, there's too much story, and like, it's making me already suspicious of what this music is going to be like. You know what I mean? If you have to tell me that much, then you're worried I'm not going to get it when I just listen to it. But I do think that if something grabs you in a way that, not necessarily that you feel like you get it the first time you hear it, but even if you don't, if like a few hours later or a couple days later, you're like, I should go back and like, I want to go back and listen to that thing again. Like, I didn't fully grasp it, or maybe just like, I loved it and I want to hear it again. Like, there's a few different ways, but like, if you just find yourself, or if we find ourselves wanting to listen again to something, that's a good sign. Like, that's kind of like a key thing, because there are some things that you can listen to once and you go like, wow, this is like really solid, good songs, like well recorded, but just kind of like you don't remember much about it afterwards. Like, that's I think that's kind of a common thing,
But you can see through, for example, I mean, an artist that's early in their career won't necessarily have the means to record something with the sort of level of sonics that may
and like, if something, I mean, I think this is like, again, something that you kind of have to try to listen around, for lack of a better word, which is that everyone has access to like such good recording stuff now, like in their house, in their room or whatever, but also they have like access to all the same plugins and whatever else they're using. So things kind of can sound like really good, but in this generic way that's like kind of hard on the ears, to be honest, And so I think that to your first point, like, yeah, like if someone just is like doing a super low budget thing and it may not sound great, it may be like lo-fi or whatever, like you do have to figure out a way to like kind of hear through that and hear the quality of the songs and the performances and stuff and the personality behind it, like, and that can still come through any kind of like lack of funds, lack of recording acumen, whatever you would say. But you also have to do the same thing if something sounds really good. You have to be like, okay, yeah, this sounds like super pro, but like, is that what I want? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta figure out a way to like hear through that to whether there is a personality and like songs and edginess. Like, I think that one thing that unites a lot of stuff on Merge is that there's some element of punk rock in it, even if like it's not punk per se. There's like has to be something that's like weird or just like slightly off or just like a DIY feel that is, again, maybe just more in the personality of it than the actual type of songs,
So probably a really good example of that is Neutral Milk Hotel. When you first heard Aeroplane, what was your response to that? Hey there, all you record nerds. I want to tell you about BagsUnlimited.com. BagsUnlimited.com has a huge selection of vinyl record supplies. Whether you collect LPs, 7-inch singles, 78 shellacs, or anything in between, BagsUnlimited.com will sort you out. From polyline sleeves to cardboard record mailers to 7-inch storage boxes and archive quality record sleeves, protect your records of any size and shape at BagsUnlimited.com. Whether you have a small personal record collection or you're running a massive record shop, you can grab a small supply or even buy in bulk at BagsUnlimited.com. And they've got some really incredible, unique stuff. BagsUnlimited.com even has special size sleeves made especially to protect your box sets, storage boxes and sleeves for cassette tapes, protective supplies for reel-to-reel, and yes, even 8-tracks. Just go to BagsUnlimited.com, click on Audio Supplies, and prepare to be impressed by all the options they have. That's BagsUnlimited.com.
Probably a really good example of that is Neutral Milk Hotel. When you first heard Aeroplane, what was your response to that?
Well, I mean, I think our response to that was like, this is amazing. The real thing was like the first time we heard On Avery Island, because that was the first time that we really listened to a whole record by the band, and it was like on a tape that Jeff's lawyer and friend, this guy Brian McPherson, who we work with also, we already knew him. That's why he was sending it to us. He's like, you guys should check this out. And I think that Laura's first impression was like, this band has like trombones and stuff. Like, what are we like? I don't know. Like, this is like too weird or whatever. But I think that, you know, the more we listened, we're just like, this is just an amazing, like, creative person making something like we'd never heard before. And then Aeroplane was just like the solidification of all that, you know, into something even more powerful. You know, as happens, I think when people are first starting to really express themselves, they're like trying things and then like honing in on like their strengths, or like, you know, yes, they're expressing themselves on the first record, but then on the second record, like they've like shed some of the things that are like impeding like the purest expression of what they're trying to do, you know, because they're just maturing and like learning how to do what they're doing. So I just think that that first tape was just kind of like one of those things of like, yeah, this is crazy, but like nothing, we don't, like no one else sounds like this. We kind of have to, like, we have to put this out.
Yeah. And I mean, the success of that album may have cut short the ability for Jeff to grow and put out even more material. Was there any discussion about a potential next album after that before it all kind of got cut off?
Not really, just in the sense that like we just thought like, oh well, he's just doing what bands do. He's like touring, because he toured a bunch on that record. I mean, Superchunk toured with Neutral Milk Hotel a lot on Aeroplane, you know, and they were opening for us. Like they were an amazing live band, but they were not a big band yet, you know. And I think that we just figured, yeah, like they'll do this and then go back and make another record. But then they didn't, and then the longer they didn't, the more that Aeroplane like grew in everyone's imagination and like just became this thing, so that when they years and years and years later came back and played shows, like when we came to Australia with them in 2013 or something, they were way bigger than they had ever been the first time around, you know, because so many people had years to like learn about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the pressure and I guess anticipation kind of made a follow-up almost impossible.
I mean, that's what it seems like, you know. I don't know if Jeff would describe it that way, or if maybe he would say he expressed what he needed to express. But you know, that became a record that, I mean, while we're talking about vinyl, like so interesting because I used to work in a record store, and I'm trying to think of like what these records were back then. I mean, one of them was like probably like Bob Marley Exodus or something like that. But like a record that when kids go to college, like everyone gets a copy of like these 3 records or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's or like the record that your older cool sibling like gets for you, like you got to hear this. Like that's one of them now. You know, is Aeroplane, which is really cool, and that's, you know, kind of an amazing thing to have made.
Mm-hmm. So Mac, we're getting ready to wrap up here. Hey, any other thoughts on records or vinyl or your visit to Australia?
I mean, not really. I mean, when it comes to vinyl, like I love, you know, I was kind of sad the last time I was in Australia because like my favorite record stores, some of them were gone. I'll go, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But still like a country that's produced so many great records. And one of my favorite, a couple of my favorite vinyl records in my collection are records. One is the first album by the Hoodoo Gurus, Stone Age Romeos, which I have the Australian version because that was what was available in America before they made the American version, and it's got a much better cover. And I saw them on that first tour in a really small club here in Chapel Hill, and it was amazing. And then I saw them a couple of years ago here in Chapel Hill again at the same club in a much bigger location now than it was in 1984 or whatever year that was. Mm-hmm. And when I went and saw them this time, I brought our son, who's 17, to see them, and like he loves them. And I also got to bring my Fun Things 7-inch to get Brad Shepard to sign, which was really awesome. And he was like, whoa, like this is the French pressing. Like he knew what it was and everything, even though it's like very old record, you know, like late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, so I have a lot of like strong vinyl Australian bands associations.
Mm-hmm. Do you pay attention to things like, oh, this is French pressing of an Australian, or do you look for first pressings? Does that matter to you that much?
I always like it when I can find like an old pressing, but I don't need like the most expensive version of something. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather have an old version than a new version, but I don't need like the rarest version, if that makes sense.
Right. Is there anything that's a hole in your collection? Something you're hoping to fill, Australian or otherwise? Something we can look for you.
Right. So, you know, I don't have the other fun things singles. So, if anyone just has like it's like a random spare copy of that lying around, that's probably something you could bring down to the show, or maybe the Lee Remick 7-inch by the Go-Betweens, and you know, just any of those easy to find titles. You probably have sitting in your garage.
Yeah,
you know,
those records that cost more than your car. Yeah, if you got a spare,
exactly.
bring them down to the Superchunk shows. All right, well, Mac, I'm going to let you go, mate. Thanks again for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you down under. Again, Superchunk is coming down to Australia in December. TroubadourPresents.com. And Mac, if you need a shepherd to take you through a few record shops or at least point you in the right direction, let me know. Happy to help, mate.
Awesome. What town are you in?
Sydney.
Rad. Okay, great. I think we have a day off there.
Excellent. We'll see you in December, man.
See you there. Yeah.
Cheers.
Take care.
Oh, man, fascinating dude. I think we could easily do another couple hours with him, and hopefully we'll get him back on in the near future. We're definitely going to be checking him out when Superchunk comes down to Australia in December. So don't forget, get your tickets now. Australia, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, TroubadourPresents.com. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. I want to thank each and every one of you for your ear time. You know, if you got a couple extra minutes for your pal Nate, you can always leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You know, 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10. Say something nice, make us blush. That is always appreciated. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.